time we'll take questions from the audience, and I'd like you to please limit your questions to 3 minutes because there's a lot of us here, and this will take a lot of time. So I'm going to go right down the list, and the first name is Don Johnston.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might recommend, if everybody who wants to speak could raise their right hand, and the chairman will swear you all in at once. We know how to do it over and over again.
Please stand up. You swear that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
My name is Don Johnston. I'm the neighbor on the south side of 232, and I'm the one of the ones, at least, that Tom's referring to. That, and he and I might agree on a lot of things, but we don't agree on this particular thing. I like our new neighbors. Tom and Gina are nice folks. We haven't known them for a long time, but I'm really enjoying them. Tom and I talk about things over the fence. We tell stories. I'm the unofficial progress inspector on the site. We both enjoy the architectural finds, the even archaeological finds on the site that kind of emerge when you start digging around, especially with all the excess amount of work that's had to be done. And of course, Tom has a really nice two-stage snowblower. So that's a feature. We do disagree on one thing, but that's business. It's not personal. And I hope our relationship survives this, because you really can't rely on having good neighbors. It's not a given. It's not something you can just expect to happen when somebody buys the house next to you or when you buy into a new neighborhood. It's also not a given that when somebody buys the house next to you, that it will be restored. I mean, it's certainly a possibility, even in the historic district, that the house might be a teardown. It may not follow the spec or meet the requirements, or just be too much of a hassle to conform to whatever today's standards might be. So it's not a given that the house next to you is going to be restored. I'm happy that it is, because I prefer restoration to the uncertainty of something new going in its place. The restoration on this site, particularly of the barn, the coach house. It's the coach house that's being, it's more of a salvage job that's taking place there. It was fairly extensive. I think the people that did it did a very good job, and Tom was there every day working with the people that did it and paying attention to what was going on. I think that's pretty desirable with the neighborhood as well. But if we talk about things that are reasonable to expect or not, one of the things that's reasonable to expect if I'm living in the central, the core single-family residential area is that my neighbor, whoever it may be, whether I like them or not, whether they tear it down or fix it up, that it's going to be a single-family residential place. This is not a single-family residential application. And as nice as it may be, and as much confidence that I have that Tom and Gina would run the good shop, it's not residential. It's not single-family. It's benefiting from the single-family, but it's not adding anything to the core of that situation. It isn't a single-family residence, and maybe there's a spot I can stand. Maybe it's across the street and down the block, and if I tip my head to one side and I don't see the bed and breakfast sign and I can't see the 6 or 7 or 8 cars in the driveway, maybe it looks like all the other houses around it, but it isn't like the other houses around it. It's a business. One of the things that the documents say is that it is, it fits the context of the neighborhood. I have no idea what that means, but I don't agree with it fitting the context. It doesn't agree with the nature of the neighborhood. It's not single family. It isn't the heart of the neighborhood. It really isn't part of what it is that makes the neighborhood what it is. It's an interloper. It's a business. If I wanted to live next to a business, I shouldn't come here and ask you guys to figure out how to make that happen. I should move. It isn't appropriate for me to ask the business to be installed next to me, or across the street, or down the road, or in all of those places. It doesn't fit. One other thing I'd like to quickly say is that I am disappointed, discouraged, unhappy with the general characterization by staff and to some extent the application that says, well, it's only LaGrange Road after all. And frankly, I lived there for 39 years in the house I'm in. It's an 1877 house. And I was involved some 30 years ago, as some of the people here might have been, in what was a pretty big hassle with IDOT, when they wanted to plow through town with a really wide blade and add 6 feet to the road so they could drive really big trucks through and odd-sized loads and wide loads and tandem trailers and things like that. And the village and the residents said, nuh-uh. This is a residential area. It's an important one. It's a part of the historic district, and you can't just plow through there with that situation. So a lot of concessions were obtained in the way of speed limit, non-designated truck routes. A scale was given for us to be able to weigh trucks. We had trees. We got brickways. A lot of things happened, lighting and so forth, to mitigate the high-volume traffic aspects of Range Road as an imposition on the historic neighborhood. To now look at that situation, that high traffic situation, and say, well, it's okay to do a bed and breakfast here because we already have the traffic. We don't already have the traffic up and down the driveway outside my dining room window. We don't already have the traffic, the strangers parking in a parking lot just beside my patio. That's not part of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Hi, it's Dan Oldmich, 243 South of Range Road. I have a couple of comments or questions and things that you might think about when you're considering this. One is in staff zoning text amendments, where they talk about location and restriction, and they limit the bed and breakfast establishments at this time, which may infer spot zoning, and I would hope you would look at that and define it better, and get the areas defined where you wish to have bed and breakfast if this goes ahead, because spot zoning is not a thing you want to do in this town at all. Another thing is, I'd like to know how they figured the number of units to 6 plus the innkeeper, because when you get into another clarification I need from the staff report, they speak of parking with Oak Parks, where it's 2 spaces plus 1 per guest room, which in this case with 6 guest rooms would equal 8. But further into the report where we're talking about parking, they say the petitioner is in agreement with staff's recommendation of 7. I'm a little confused there. If it's 2 plus 1 per guest room, it's 8, not 7. It's a simple math thing. I think a bed and breakfast in town is a nice thing to consider, but I think you want to consider how much you put in one basket, and I think this case is a little too much. Parking in this area, be it 7 or 8 spaces, I think is too many. Tandem parking, I don't think would properly work unless it's just the innkeeper, as it were, because this one is just considered as an innkeeper. Personally, I think it should be owned and operated anywhere in town. Since accessibility was brought up and a common space in the basement was brought up, I would question how accessibility works to get to the basement, since the lift on the porch that they're adding is only up to the porch, which gets you to the first floor, does not get you to a basement. Also, since this house is old, it is wood construction. You do, as mentioned also, that you have a lot of people in here, if it's fall, aren't familiar with the place. If a fire happens, it's going to go quick. This is old dried wood, and that goes up very quickly. The fire suppression system, to me, should be a requirement. Along with, as a bed and breakfast comes, and I know it's this commission's decision, but I believe that a traffic study should be done anywhere a bed and breakfast is thought to be coming in to be pertinent. I'm not necessarily against a bed and breakfast. I'm against this as proposed because I think the parking doesn't work for the neighborhood, and I think it's just too much for the lot size and what's there.
Hi, I'm Bob Brogan. I'm at 219 South Madison. I back up to the other Miss Lucy house. We've been, my wife and I have been there for 11 years. We've been residents of LaGrange for 20. There's a couple of things that, from both a strategic and from a tactical perspective, bring some concern here. And one is when you talked initially about B&B permissibility and the assumptions that if LaGrange is a destination and if there is such thing as a need for a destination, then the limitation of a B2B only to LaGrange Road as the destination is not necessarily the only answer, because we have through streets on Ashland, Kensington, all the way through to Brainerd, and those pieces need to be strategically considered into the equation. The second piece strategically is if there is a number of B&B locations or special zoning permits, how many are you going to put in a specific geographic area of four-block radius? Or is 7th Avenue an option, or 9th Avenue? And with some of the traffic issues that we already have, where do you stop with regard to this? The second thing is we've had significant issues and discussions over the year on coverage and bulk use for residential players, and this zoning committee and has had some issues with consistent enforcement. I shouldn't say the committee, but more the village as a whole in certain areas, and how are we to make certain that they can even address these issues as well as the tactical that I want to bring up in a moment. The third strategic issue that I'd like to bring up is one of viability. We have not heard anything tonight that brings to any idea, while I applaud the idea and the thought process, there's no financial understanding or viability. If Tom and Gina do, as Greg asked, on a disposition standpoint, how are they going to dispose of a bed and breakfast? Is the next thing for the next buyer to come in and apply for a rooming house option if with failure here? You have to wonder where the house of cards stops. And then of all the supporters who came up, I don't believe any of them, well, this is just a guess, none of them appear to have children under the age of 18, or if they do, they're very close to adult age. And on the 200 block of Madison, there are at least, I would say, and on LaGrange Road, at least 20 to 25 children in that block that there has been no consideration for the safety, security, and considerations for that. Even in the plans, there's no thoughts on fencing, on any security guards or security lamps. We have an obligation to the people who bought these houses in the residential district to make certain that their security concerns are taken into place. The liquor license in the application or thought process on the liquor license is how do you limit events, and at what point do you limit events associated with it? And so that needs to be a consideration as well. And if you have 6 people in and out, refuse pickup and falling back on refuse pickup for as a residential facility is not doesn't seem like a feasible consideration for this project. So those are my comments to think about. Thanks.
Hi, John Weger, 345 6th Avenue. I guess you've known me in the past to be someone who's come and nitpick the code. I'm not going to let it down tonight. I heard a lot of comments about it turns out to be an interesting coincidence. I, too, was curious about what other towns do, and I happened to just take a look at Oak Park and Naperville, which people have noticed in Hinsdale, and I pulled up their code to see what they did. And interestingly, all 3 towns either specifically cited or had adopted the language of something called the Illinois Bed and Breakfast Act. And so I printed off a copy of that and compared it to the language that was drafted into this petition. And right away, even just the first 2 items in this act, we seem to be not in compliance with. So if we're going to be comparing ourselves to Oak Park and Naperville and Hinsdale, then I think we should use our state statute on bed and breakfast. Secondly, and so just in case you're curious, Article A, Item A says they limit it to only 5 guest rooms, not 6. The second article says that they require the agent, the owner, to live in the bed and breakfast establishment so that it's first a home and then a place where guests stay. It's not a boutique hotel, it's a home first. I stopped there. I think there's actually a couple other things. Secondly, in Naperville's code, they do not allow bed and breakfast in residential areas. They allow it only in something called a transitional use zone. So their zoning does not allow bed and breakfast in residential zones. And then I heard, looking at the parking plan, it looks to me like 5 cars parked on the driveway. I can't park 5 cars on my driveway. Zoning code limits me to 4. So I'm not sure why people who live next door to this should have to get 5 cars when other people don't have to live next door to 5 cars. And then just lastly, I just think it's interesting that in the past I've heard comments from this commission which, almost kind of border on hostile towards residents who want to have their nanny or their teenage daughter or somebody live above their garage. But we'll let perfect strangers come in like the revolving door in a residential neighborhood. So that seems a little inconsistent to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I live at 231 with my husband and our 2 daughters. First, I want to say, at first when we heard about this, we're like, oh, that sounds like a nice idea. But the more we thought about it, the more we changed our mind wholeheartedly. And, this is in no way an attack on personal and our feelings. So I'm just going to basically read from my letter. One of the main reasons we bought our current house is the existence of an all-residential zone district within walking distance to downtown LaGrange and the beauty of the existing single-family homes. This is also one of the main characteristics of that set LaGrange apart from many other communities. The beautiful drive into downtown from the south, which contains a wonderful example of single-family period residence, is still being used as such. Though the applicant has referred to maintaining the character of the home, he would be renovating as a B&B. Character is more than the outward appearance of a single home itself. Character is also in the properties and characteristics of the neighborhood. The district, as it exists right now, is entirely residential zone and has a neighborhood feel, even though it is located on the main thoroughfare. Putting up lighted signs, having additional parking spots, staff coming and going would change the makeup of this neighborhood. And we would have certainly changed our view on purchasing our home in this section of town. The applicant also stated that the application, that there are several vacant homes and that the direction of the neighborhood is currently in a downward trend. This statement could not be further from the truth. as it is no more in a downward trend than the rest of LaGrange or the nation during this recession. In fact, we moved in nearly 4 years ago and have done extensive renovations to our home, all the while maintaining a period appeal. Other neighbors at 321 and 124 have done the same thing within the last 3 years. It should be noted that there were also other offers to the same home the applicant purchased, which more than likely would have been purchased and renovated by a family for use as a primary residence, as all the other sales on LaGrange Road have been in the last 10 years. The other point that the application makes related to the downward trend are the vacant homes on the 200 block of LaGrange Road. The vacant houses and the applicant refers to have never been on the market for sale and are still owned by family or trust, as the case for many homes throughout LaGrange, where elderly residents have passed away or can no longer maintain their homes. This is not a downward trend, but the fact of life in a mature community with historic homes and aging residents. The bottom line is that the demand exists and the neighborhood is thriving even in this extremely difficult economic condition. One of the best examples of what can happen with exemptions or homes that don't fit the characteristics of a neighborhood is right next door to us at 235. Before local zoning ordinances were instituted, the house was a 2-flat and remains that way today. It's had very little interest and is now in foreclosure. None of the other homes that have been for sale on the street when priced accordingly have had this issue. In fact, a beautiful home just down the street sold for $800,000 recently. Had that been next to a commercial enterprise, that would not have been the case. We did a little bit of research on bed and breakfast and their success rate. The median occupancy is 40% at best, according to the Professional Association of Innkeepers. Bed and breakfast also fail at a rate of 1 out of 2 in the first 2 years and 2 out of 3 within the first 5 years. Once this home is converted to a B&B, and if that business should fail, its appeal to single-family buyers will greatly reduce it and have a negative impact on all single-family real estate in the neighborhood. The B&B would bring little new foot traffic to LaGrange and would realistically have very high chances of failure. The retail and restaurant businesses in our downtown will survive based on their quality and support of local residents, not because a handful of guests to a B&B, the majority of which will be relatives of residents who would have frequented local businesses regardless of the existence of a bed and breakfast. In summary, the application for a B&B does not prove a community need. Will have an adverse impact on proximate single-family real estate and will change the dynamic of a unique neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Ellie Wood. I live in 217 South LaGrange Road. I have several things. First of all, we love living in this area, but how did Mr. Perry even consider constructing living quarters in a coach house when there's a current ordinance against it? And even if only one business is allowed to operate in this residential area, presumption by the public will be that sooner or later the complete area is going business and will choose not to purchase homes in this area. This will reduce our currently low property values even further. And the village ordinances talk about the single-family residents perpetuating the existing high-quality residential character by preserving established neighborhoods. Well, you are not preserving our neighborhood if you put in a bed and breakfast. The traffic limitations say no home occupation shall generate more traffic than is typical of residences in the area. Well, if you have 7 cars in a parking area, that's a lot more than my home. And also, it says the entrepreneur of every home occupation shall be domiciled in the dwelling unit where such occupation is conducted. Well, he does not plan to live in that home. So there again, another ordinance is not. Are you going to rewrite the entire ordinance for the village for this? We are not happy about this, and we're hoping that the village will look very carefully.
My walker's foot, excuse me. Hi, I'm going to see if I can do this without a microphone. I usually don't need one. My voice is very loud. I seem to be at odds with my neighbors at 220 and 228 South LaGrange Road. I live at 224 South LaGrange Road, and I've lived there now for 27 years. My introduction to LaGrange, however, goes back to the early 1950s. I grew up near Midway Airport, small, tiny little house, blue-collar family, and there was a place called Prince Castle on the corner of Ogden and LaGrange Road. And my parents used to take us there on Sunday afternoon, and we'd get these ice cream cones, and then drive down LaGrange Road and look at these beautiful homes, the crown elms, everything. We never thought I would, never. But we do, for 27 years now. I have people have talked about the traffic on LaGrange Road. I used to smoke. I quit 4 years ago. Didn't smoke in the house. I have a nice front porch. Even in winter, I would go out there. I cannot tell you how many times I have seen trucks, not so much anymore, but cars barreling down LaGrange Road at 40, 50 miles an hour. When I'm driving and trying to pull into my driveway, the directional signals are on, and I hear people slamming and screeching their brakes behind me. I'm always fearful that I'm going to get rear-ended pulling into my own driveway. I happen to share a driveway with 228 South LaGrange Road, and I'm continually looking to make sure that visitors to my property aren't pulling in and blocking the driveway so that they can't get out. And I've had to knock on their door several times to ask them to have their guests move their cars. Now, if you've ever tried to look at an address on LaGrange Road and find it at night, you can't do it. We called 911 last summer. I had to go out to the street and wave at the ambulance because they're down by 200 with a flashlight trying to look at the addresses. That's our own ambulance. The LaGrange Fire Department couldn't find it. What are they going to do when they try and find? I can imagine somebody pulling into my driveway, parking, unloading their car, thinking they're in the right spot, and go check in and go to bed. What does my wife do when she wants to go to work? And we're going to have that on the other side of the street, too. People are going to be looking for it. So I don't see this stuff about the traffic and being on LaGrange Road as an ideal situation. Like I said, I have a great front porch. We sit out there all the time. It's screened in. I don't have to worry about bugs. I can't stand the thought of sitting out there night after night and glancing over about 75 feet. I don't even need to turn my face 75 feet to see peripheral vision and see that bed and breakfast sign out there. You think that's going to help my property value? No chance. Not at all. The renovation will help my property value, but the bed and breakfast business will not. So I racked my brain, and in his original letter, Tom said there was one neighbor that was adamantly opposed. That was me. I told him no way would I ever support it. That it doesn't fit the neighborhood. They talk about 7 cars in a driveway, and they even mentioned parking in the driveway. What are the cars behind them? I'm sorry, one minute. What are the cars behind them going to do when they want to get out? We're going to have people backing out cars on LaGrange Road. That's difficult enough. One other thing, as soon as I heard about it, before Tom even held his neighborhood meeting, I stopped in at the hall here, and I went into the buildings group, and I said, asked them about it and the application and stuff, and was told that they can't just change the zoning for one lot, that it has to be a minimum a square block, which means everybody on the west side of LaGrange and the east side of Madison, from Elm to Maple, their zoning will be changed to something other than residential. Now, I don't know about anybody else in the town, but my taxes have gone up 40% in 2 years. What is Cook County going to do when those zoning changes take place? They're just itching to look for it. And sorry, LaGrange, You can't control Cook County. Thank you.